Hello, everybody. It's me again. For decades, water infrastructure was treated like background noise in the economy. Pipes underground, reservoirs far away, something governments dealt with quietly while capital chased flashier narratives. Today, however, three separate stories unfolding across the American Southwest quietly expose the same truth. Water is no longer optional, negotiable, or delayable. This is not a story about politics, it is a story about physics colliding with policy deadlines. What changes, however, is the path capital must take to arrive. Markets don't move when the crowd expects them to. They move when pressure builds quietly underneath the surface. This is Quant Trade Talk, where we track capital before it becomes obvious. Capital moves quietly. We move earlier. Quant Trade Talk. Capital moves. We move earlier. Quant Trade Talk.
Just in the last 90 minutes, we have learned about a bill with bipartisan support that President Donald Trump vetoed.
And that's big news because his longtime ally, Lauren Boebert, was the sponsor. The bill would have provided clean water to rural southeast Colorado. Our Matt Morrow on it for us tonight. Matt.
Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who for years has stood by and been one of President Donald Trump's most ardent supporters, is now publicly criticizing him in a statement she just shared with Fox 31. And this is all about a bipartisan bill that would have helped provide clean water to tens of thousands of people in southeastern Colorado. That bill would help finish the Arkansas Valley Conduit by extending the loan time and cutting the interest. Again, this would have all helped provide clean and reliable water to some 50,000 people in the state. The bill is co-sponsored by Colorado Republican Congressman Jeff Hurd and tied to a Senate bill that both of Colorado's Democratic senators introduced. President Trump just this week vetoed the bill, writing in part, and I quote, "Enough is enough. My administration is committed to preventing American taxpayers from funding expensive and unreliable policies. Ending the massive cost of taxpayer handouts and restoring fiscal sanity is vital to the economic growth and the fiscal health of the nation."
At the center of the first story is the Arkansas Valley Conduit, a drinking water project first authorized in 1962 to serve 39 communities on Colorado's eastern plains. More than 60 years later, that same project remains unfinished. Earlier this year, Donald Trump vetoed a funding bill. It was actually his first veto, and it was vetoed despite unanimous bipartisan support in Congress. The veto was framed as fiscal responsibility, a so-called taxpayer handout that should instead be funded locally. We have a lot of those these days. But the water itself does not care how it's funded. The groundwater in the region remains highly saline, occasionally radioactive, and structurally unsuitable for long-term human consumption. That reality does not change with the veto pen. History, however, shows that when infrastructure projects are delayed rather than canceled, total capital expenditures often rise by 10 to 30% due to inflation, redesign, and phased execution. In practice, this shifts funding from federal grants towards state bonds, municipal debt, and utility-led financing mechanisms that expand regulated rate bases rather than eliminate spending. For regulated utilities, delayed federal funding often results in higher long-term earnings visibility, not lower demand. This is why the Arkansas Valley story is not a thesis break, it is funding friction, but not capital destruction. That brings us to our next story.
ASU and NASA finds that our groundwater storage could be in trouble.
Not everybody agrees, though, on how big of a problem this actually is. Steve Nielsen breaks it down for us.
Well, the science here is really interesting. It's all about using data collected from space on how gravity impacts groundwater. But some of the farmers we spoke with said that the data on the ground doesn't match the data from space.
For years, Fox 10's been going to Kaywood Farms to see impacts of the drought firsthand.
Before we ever put a new crop in, we go through and we prepare that field so they're as level as can be.
That was 3 years ago. Today, Nancy Kaywood told us they continue to spend big money to make sure their flood irrigation doesn't waste water.
Our fields are dead level from side to side, and there's a slight slope that runs from the irrigation ditch to the end of the field.
But flood irrigation is listed as a big problem in new research by NASA and Arizona State University.
It was surprising for us actually, because we found that groundwater is being used up much faster than we are expecting.
Scientist Karim Abdelmasin says they use the satellite called GRACE to track groundwater in the Colorado River Basin for more than 20 years.
There is a measurement of change in the gravity field, and this gravity has a sensitivity to any change in the water in surface or subsurface.
They found the basin has lost equal to the storage capacity of Lake Mead in the last 20 years. 74% of that.
The second story moves south, where physics becomes impossible to ignore. A joint study conducted by Arizona State University and NASA used satellite gravity measurements to track groundwater depletion across the Colorado River basin. Their findings were stark. Over the last 20 years, the basin lost groundwater equivalent to the full storage capacity of Lake Mead. 74% of that loss occurred in Arizona alone. Now this is really good for a stock that we underlined in our watch list video. We're going to release that soon, GWRS, Growth Water Resources, because of course they're focused on the high growth markets within Arizona. So that's definitely a plus there. More alarming is the acceleration. Groundwater depletion this last decade occurred at 3 times the rate of the decade before. Scientists attribute this primarily to prolonged drought, followed by agricultural demand and flood irrigation practices. Now this one is a little bit concerning because you have very radical, what I consider to be radical ideas, especially when you look at historical moments in Europe and Canada, where you have the farmers protesting. I'll let you hear this lady speak, and you can kind of place your own opinion on it in terms of where this could lead long term.
Both offered a solution in your chapter that might not be very popular. Sarah, just give us an outline.
Sure. Well, we make the argument that paying people to temporarily leave their water in the reservoirs isn't a long-term solution. The only long-term solution is to retire demand. Most demand comes from agricultural use. 70 to 80% of demand in the Colorado Basin. And so the solution is voluntary retirement of agricultural lands. And we argue that the federal government needs to take the lead with this.
Retirement's a nice word for reductions?
Yeah,
no more deliveries of water?
There are different ways it could be done. There could be farmers in some parts of this vast Colorado watershed who would be happy to receive a payment to stop farming their lands.
Receive a payment, so we're still in the business.
For permanently retiring their lands from agriculture. Lots of farmers have parts of their lands that are less productive than others, and so maybe they could retire their less productive parts of their land. We cite in our report, we cite a study by an agronomist at the University of Arizona, George Frisvold, who's done a kind of assessment of the different values of agricultural land throughout the basin. Not surprisingly, there are big differences. The lands down in the Southwest, in Yuma, in California, are very high value agricultural lands. The lands up in the upper basin tend to be much lower value. That isn't a great place to grow food and fiber.
That isn't a great place.
Compared with the lower basin.
Impressive, right? But while some farmers dispute the severity or regional uniformity of the data, policy does not wait for unanimous agreement. When groundwater losses accelerate at that scale, regulation follows. No question about it. Groundwater depletion forces infrastructure responses. Monitoring systems must be installed, pumping must be measured, treatment, recycling, and conveyance projects follow. Historically, these responses unfold over years, not months. But once initiated, they are mandatory, not discretionary. Even if select regions stabilize, system-wide mitigation spending continues to rise because compliance is structural, not optional. This is where quiet capital moves first, into monitoring, treatment technology, and small systems that cannot absorb compliance costs alone. The third story is going to widen the lens out to the entire Colorado River basin, which supplies water to roughly 40 million people across 7 states. Take a look.
Creators praise their sacrifices in rooms side by side.
We put everything that we have on the table.
In one room, the upper basin states, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, the source of the majority of the water in the Colorado. In the other, California, the biggest user of Colorado River water. America's two largest reservoirs along the Colorado, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, have fallen to critically low levels.
We don't have another water supply. So absent the Colorado River, we have to move someplace else.
The 7 states that make up the Colorado River Basin have until February 14th to come up with a plan. They missed a November deadline and all the deadlines before that.
We still seem to be very much in our corners, asserting our own best arguments.
The upper basin states want big cuts for California, Arizona, and Nevada, the states that get their water from Lake Mead. And those states have agreed to make significant mandatory reductions. But they want the upper basin states to commit to mandatory conservation as well. The upper basin, though, insists their cuts should be voluntary.
If it's the best efforts of the upper basin and they fail in those best efforts, even with the best of intentions, then guess who has to take the cuts? Us.
If anyone believes that the upper
Now, as you may have heard, Arizona alone receives approximately 30% of its water from the river. Today, the basin's 2 largest reservoirs, including Lake Mead, sit near historic lows. Negotiations between the 7 basin states have repeated missed deadlines, and the latest agreement must be submitted by February 14th. This deadline matters because failure does not result in inaction. Failure triggers federal intervention. Historically, federal rulemaking accelerates infrastructure spending because timelines become enforced rather than negotiated. Litigation does not repair pipes, enforcement does. Counterintuitively, interstate deadlock has often produced the most aggressive capital deployment, not the least. Federal oversight reduces credit uncertainty, stabilizes funding flows, and compresses project timelines. For utilities and infrastructure operators, that translates into faster execution and more predictable cost recovery. When these 3 stories are viewed together, the pattern is pretty clear. Political vetoes reroute funding, groundwater depletion forces compliance, interstate conflict accelerates federal enforcement. None of these outcomes reduce the need for water infrastructure. Each one raises the eventual capital requirement. That's why our first flagship thesis remains intact. Invalidation essentially requires federal withdrawal, state abandonment, and physical water recovery occurring simultaneously. None of those conditions are present. Instead, we see delayed funding increase in total capex, accelerated groundwater laws triggering regulation, and missed negotiation deadlines pulling federal authority forward. Before concluding, consider 2 plausible bullish catalyst paths that could emerge from these developments altogether. In the first scenario, federal enforcement accelerates across multiple fronts. An override or alternative funding mechanism revives the Arkansas Valley Conduit, while failure to reach a Colorado River agreement triggers federal rulemaking. Utilities respond by expanding rate bases, issuing debt, and executing projects under enforced timelines. Capital flows increase not because politics improved, but because enforcement removed uncertainty. In the second scenario, groundwater regulation accelerates faster than expected. Arizona expands groundwater management areas, mandates monitoring and mitigation, and forces municipalities into compliance spending earlier than expected. Smaller systems struggle to absorb costs and seek acquisition exits. Treatment and monitoring providers experience a surge in high-frequency contracts. Consolidation accelerates quietly, long before retail narratives form. Both scenarios share the same foundation. They do not require optimism. They require inevitability. Water infrastructure is not cyclical, it is not discretionary, and it is not ideological. You can delay votes, you can delay funding, you can delay agreements, but you cannot delay population growth, portable standards, or physics. That is why capital continues to move quietly beneath the surface. That is why regulated utilities recover costs. And that is why this flagship thesis remains valid. This is not a hype trade. It is a replacement cycle, and we are still early. Quantitative talks.